Well, hello, everyone, and thanks for listening to The Quality Hub, chatting with ISO experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis, and today I'm here with Bruce Newman, consultant at Core Business Solutions. Bruce has been on a few times, and great to have you back.
Good to be back.
So today's podcast is going to be on integrating ISO 9001 with other standards. But before we begin, let's ask Bruce a question. If you would like to go forward or back in time and meet anyone, who would that be?
Wow, back or forward in time. I'd probably like to go back and talk to some of my ancestors in my ancestry. I don't have a lot of history because my family was in Germany.
Okay.
And they go back to World War I, and we lost a lot of history when my family came over here. So my family history only goes back to my great-grandparents.
Wow.
So my dad's side. So I'd probably like to go back to like great-great-grandparents, great-great-great-grandparents, and talk to some of them and see what life was like in Germany and see what kind of lives they had.
That's cool. That would be something pretty interesting. I could certainly see why that would be something you want to do. Well, let's get started with today's podcast. The first question is, what is an IMS and what does it mean to integrate ISO 9001 with other standards?
So an IMS is an integrated management system, and all it really means is you're taking the related elements of the ISO standards and incorporating them to make your management standard. Basically, you're creating a management standard versus just a quality standard or a safety standard or an environmental standard, and creating an incorporated standard that makes life easier for you so that you don't have multiple standards to deal with.
Okay. In doing that, what do you think the main benefits of implementing an IMS is versus managing each standard separately?
I think one of the biggest things is like culturally and psychologically, you're just looking at the business as a whole and a single standard. So you're looking, again, like I said, it's like a business standard now. So you're thinking of a single group of controls for all of your business. Things like managing corrective actions, non-conformances, and you apply the same types of controls to all your different business processes rather than piecemealing different types of approaches to all different aspects of your business.
Okay. So you're sort of congealing them all down into one and having them apply across.
Yeah, and you get consistency across the board. People don't have to learn a bunch of different ways to do things. You know, you get to apply the same type of methodology to all different types of incidents. Okay.
Do you find that to be a cost-saving measure too when you implement them together?
There are cost savings, but they come in a variety of ways. One would be, I guess, training. For one, you can train people to handle a variety of different types of issues in the same manner. So your certification costs are reduced.
Okay.
You can do single certification audits.
So you would just have one auditor come in that could cover all those standards?
Ideally, yes. Sometimes if you've really done a good job of integrating and you've got multiple standards, it does require more than one auditor, depending on, how.
So like how many you have?
Yeah, some registrars have auditor resources with real skilled auditors that have multiple certifications, but there are times when it's helpful to have more than one auditor.
Okay.
But typically that would shorten your audit time, so the cost would still be reduced.
Right. And also you're looking at probably less time that they're going to be on site, travel time they might have, that type of thing.
Yeah, it would reduce auditor hours overall.
Yep. And also looking at the actual cost. All right. Well, those are good ideas, are good reasons why it might save some money. What do you find are the key challenges that organizations typically face when integrating multiple ISO standards into that one system?
Well, a lot of times they have a hard time wrapping their head around the idea that processes are not the same thing as departments.
Okay.
A lot of companies they've siloed certain aspects of their business, like they've got someone in charge of safety, someone in charge of environment, someone in charge of quality, and they don't really understand the idea that you can combine, for example, the review of all three processes at one time, or you can do an internal audit of all three of those at the same time. So there's a little bit of, sometimes it's a little bit of rivalry maybe between departments.
Okay.
It comes into play sometimes. It depends on the culture of the business. But once you get over the departmental aspects of it and convince folks that we're not talking about departments here, we're talking about processes. Once you convince them and school them on the idea that we're talking about processes versus departments or silos, usually they come to an understanding on the advantages of integrating the systems.
So it sounds like even if integration is a good idea, just let's say a company has started with ISO 9001 and they're already in ISO 9001 certified, and they add another standard or two. It's sort of like adjusting the culture where people are thinking about things being connected where before they may not have been. Sort of like when they started 9001, they're not looking at the whole business as a whole. They're looking at certain things this person does, certain things this person does, where they're not taking a holistic approach and looking at it all as one.
Yeah, like you can run into problems if you've got a quality manager and a safety manager. Who's going to run the integrated system?
Yeah.
So you can run into issues there. Again, like I said, it can become a power struggle thing,
right,
that you have to overcome.
But once you get over those humps, they find it to be pretty good?
Yeah, usually.
Awesome. So the next question, Bruce, how does integrating affect documentation? You already mentioned audits. A little more on that. Management reviews. Do you find that it reduces duplication or does it add complexity?
Well, as far as documentation goes, you can cut down considerably. So you can incorporate everything into a single manual.
Okay. There's
a number of clauses that duplicate across many of the standards. Like I said, corrective action, nonconformances, internal audit, management review. So there's a lot of documentation and record control. All these things are the same across all the standards. So you're looking at a single type of management system for all.
Okay.
Which means the documentation is basically the same.
Okay.
You can do single audits for all, and you can incorporate management reviews as well. So obviously it not only reduces the management documentation, but also the records can be combined. I guess the only complexity would be that in some instances, like for example, if you combine the audits, it does add a little bit of complexity to the integrated audit of the integrated system.
Are we speaking external or internal or both?
Internally, primarily.
Okay. So Bruce, can you give us some examples of how organizations do align their processes, such as risk management, internal audits, and how they do it across multiple standards? You mentioned that some of the clauses are the same, but how do they look at some of these other aspects?
Well, for example, you're required to take a look at interested parties.
Okay.
So you look at interested parties from not only the point of view of, like in the case of, let's look at a system that combines quality, safety, and environment.
Okay.
We'll look at interested parties from a quality standpoint, which might include customers, vendors, employees, and regulatory agencies.
Okay.
Well, obviously, the environment and safety would include the same. But when we look at the regulatory agencies from an environmental point of view, we're looking at like EPA. And from a safety point of view, we're looking at OSHA. Depending on the locale, there may be some fire safety regulations. There may be some ladder safety regulations, all kind of different things to look at there.
Okay.
As far as risk management, gosh, there's all kinds of things there. So with quality, we're looking at risk from a quality point of view. How can things break? How can they affect the customer? From an environmental point of view, how can our products adversely affect the environment? Or how can our processes affect the environment?
Yeah, internally and externally. If you have a carcinogen that you have to handle a certain way, that's an internal effect. It might not affect the actual customer, but your employees it does.
Exactly. So we even have to look at things like, are we putting out a strong carbon footprint or not? Or how are we packaging things? And from a safety point of view, we not only have to look at safety in our products, but also safety internally. So are we creating a safe work environment for our employees?
Let's look at manufacturing. Let's take scrap for an example. You have an aspect from quality is you don't want to have a lot of scrap because it's going to cost you money. From an environmental standpoint, you're looking at it, hey, what are we going to do with this scrap? Are we just going to reuse it? Do we have to look at getting rid of it? If we get rid of it, Where do we have to get rid of it? Is it something that needs to go in a special landfill? Could it go someplace to be recycled? And from a safety point of view, where do we store the scrap? Is it something that could get little shards in somebody's eyes, or, has a danger for breathing or something like that? So you're looking at multiple aspects across all three of those.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there, because that's another area where these things align is in metrics. So, for example, like what you just said, scrap. Scrap's a good example as far as quality goes. What's the quality of our process? Is our process generating a lot of scrap? If it is, then our process is not good. In addition, we're generating a lot of scrap. How are we going to get rid of it? Environmentally, that's not good.
Right.
And also, like you just mentioned, scrap could be dangerous. If it's in a machine shop, scrap could fly around and injure somebody, or it could get into our finished goods, and possibly, in the case of maybe an aircraft industry, it could maybe get into a finished part and cause a failure for a finished part.
Yeah, or a tripping hazard. Let's say it's lumber and you're building cabinets. The more scrap you have, the easier somebody can trip over it if it's not handled properly. So that really does help you look at those things as a whole versus just from a quality standpoint. It's really good examples. So Bruce, in your experience, what are some of the best practices that you've seen when a company is implementing an IMS?
Well, I think the best practices are that a team approach is best, obviously. You want all your process owners involved, like I said, because everybody needs to be pulling the rope the same way. You don't need a bunch of departmental rivalries going on. What you need is an understanding of the fact that, this is an integrated process. We need consolidation. We need working together. With integration, it's really important because, again, a lot of times you have areas where people have historically run their own show.
Right.
And they're used to running their own shows.
Right.
And, another thing that's really helpful in these cases is going across departmental lines so having the quality people maybe do safety audits, and having the safety people do quality audits, walkthroughs in their other people's departments, and get a feel, one, for what the other guys, taking a walk in the other guy's shoes.
Yeah.
And seeing what can be done to help those folks improve. And also, you get an idea of what you can do to help them.
Yeah.
And what you can do on your end as far as what your responsibilities in the safety department are to help the quality folks, and what the quality people can do to help the safety folks. So I've always thought it was a good idea to have people walk in areas that outside of their direct sphere of influence, one, for learning experience, and also to put some fresh eyes on a situation.
I think it also helps, besides just them having some ideas, but like you said, they get to walk in your shoes. So you sort of learn a little respect, or if there is a little bit of a rivalry or something, it kind of helps get some team buy-in, and that we're kind of all in this together. It's not us against them.
The other thing I think is the best practice is when you involve the workers on the floor a lot.
Oh, yeah.
When you, especially with environment and safety quality, when you get them involved with the groundwork as far as how to reduce hazards from an environmental and a safety point of view, and risks from a quality point of view.
Yeah, I think that really it's been a thread through all of our podcasts that the more you get the people that do the job involved, the better end product you have in any of your management systems. Yep. So I want to go back to metrics that you touched on. I hadn't thought about that aspect when we were talking about integrating management systems. That's a really big key. We look at metrics from a quality standpoint, and it's generally, are we meeting certain requirements, or are we reaching our goals, whether it be monetarily or reduction of waste or things like that, which a lot of it hits the bottom line. What do you find, let's say, use an example, 14,001 and 45,001 combining with ISO 9000. What are some metrics that you see that might be new or that end up being integrated that you don't think about an aspect dealing with quality
for like environment or safety?
So let's say somebody has a 9001 system in place, and they're going to now integrate 14,001 or 45,001. Expanding your metrics out to look at more than just quality, what do you find some of those are and how they integrate better?
Yeah, so safety metrics are usually pretty easy to come up with because the government requires people to track safety metrics. And so
Right.
what we typically use there, I think it's total recordable injuries
Okay.
that's required to be tracked. So that's an easy one.
Right.
Environment's usually tough to come up with because a lot of companies these days are fairly conscious of the environment. So they're already in decent shape. So a lot of companies these days have already gone to things like LED lighting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's not a lot of opportunity for electrical savings. They're already fairly conscious about packaging, and reducing plastic use and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're recycling paper
Yeah.
and stuff. So one thing that we kind of look at now as far as the environment goes is going beyond the norm and maybe looking at things like battery recycling.
Okay.
And offering battery recycling maybe to employees. Like say you've got a wood shop and you use recycling for drills and saws and stuff.
Right.
Offer that recycling to your employees and let them bring batteries in from home.
Okay.
Or if you're a machine shop or a automotive type place, let your employees bring their oil from oil changes in.
Right.
And recycle it with your oil.
Okay.
Another thing is if you're really benign, like a administrative type office or something, or if you lease a space so that all of your environmental type activity is basically in the hands of your leased, the office owner.
Right.
Maybe you could take on a project like adopt a mile of highway.
Okay.
And do a project like that, or sponsor one of those, clean up a mile of riverfront.
Right. Right.
One of those kind of things. So that's the kind of things that you have to be really creative with environment these days.
Okay.
That's the difficult one.
How does that align with metrics?
Yeah, so metrics have to be measurable. So you have to be able to show some activity that impacts the environment. And again, that's why it's kind of tough.
Okay.
So with the safety, it's easy because you can track total recordable injuries.
Right.
And you can show a trend up or down annually with that recordable injury because it's a number.
Right.
With the environment, sometimes it's hard because you can track electrical use, but it goes up and down with the seasons. So that can be difficult.
Yeah.
But if you can show that, okay, this year we went out and we picked up this much trash on our mile of highway.
Right.
So that's something you can do if your company is fairly benign. So that's where it can be kind of difficult, but you have to be creative.
Gotcha. So there's only so much you can measure that you might not already be measuring when you're dealing with environmental. Okay. Well, this has been really good. Do you have any last thoughts on companies that may be considering integrating their management systems and maybe what to look at, what next steps they might have, maybe certain ones they should look at, those types of things?
My only advice would be that there are some companies that for whatever reason or another seem to think that it's easier to keep their systems separate. I would advise in every case to integrate.
Okay.
If nothing else, because ultimately, I think you'll find that it pays off in terms of culture and cooperation in the company, and it'll definitely pay off in cost.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, really do appreciate it, Bruce. Appreciate you being here today. Always great to talk with you.
Same.
I know that you and I both share an enjoyment of Universal Studios down in Orlando. Since you're down that way, you got to visit the new park there recently and make me jealous. So always love hearing your take there.
My pleasure. Sorry to make you jealous, but it was fun.
No, that's okay. I'll live vicariously through you when it comes to that this year. And we want to thank everyone who's listened to our podcast today. We hope it's been informative for you. Now, if you're looking for more information about Core Business Solutions, as we're now a partner with LRQA, and how we can help you with ISO certification, cybersecurity, or even customized training, please email us at info@thecoresolution.com. You can also visit our website at www.thecoresolution.com. And if you haven't already followed us on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube, please be sure to do so, and then we'll let you miss the next Quality Hub podcast when it's released next week. Have a great day.